President Trump suggested recently that he wouldn't fire Jeff Sessions before the November midterm elections. That works out perfectly, since after November, Sessions has to work his seasonal job as Santa's helper anyway.
A man was arrested at the visitors' entrance of Buckingham Palace on suspicion of carrying a stun gun. You know, there's no need to use a stun gun on the royal family, since you'll get the same effect by using the wrong fork.
Britney Spears was ordered to pay Kevin Federline thousands more a month in child support. Because, hey, it's not Kevin's fault there are new tariffs on the cost of velour tracksuits.
Cher reignited an old feud with Madonna by saying she wouldn't pick her for a duet partner. Madonna wouldn't want to duet with Cher anyway because it would cause a rip in the gay space-time continuum.
True story. World leaders at the United Nations General Assembly laughed out loud when President Trump boasted about his administration's accomplishments, but it turns out they were only laughing because Mike Pence had smashed a watermelon with a sledgehammer. The Trump Report starts now.
You're tuned in to AfterBuzz TV, the ESPN of TV talk. Now, let the buzz begin.
That's right. Welcome to the Trump Report. Thank you to Tamra for not only bringing the funny for the top of the show, but also for the musical accompaniment. I'm Christian Bladt. This is the Trump Report. That's right. And the moves for those watching on YouTube. Joined by Chelsea Galicia.
Hello.
The aforementioned Tamra Brown. And at the far end of the desk, us man 80, Scott Moore.
Woo, that was for dramatic effect.
I know, it was. It was, wait, who's here? Who's here? Oh, it's Scott Moore.
I am still chuckling on the inside about the Jeff Sessions one. That was very well
done. Why don't you explain how, before the show, you read ahead.
I couldn't
and all of a sudden,
help it.
Chelsea just starts laughing.
First of all, Christian reads in font size 75. And so I just...
See what you do when you're 42, okay? See what size you want them to be.
So they were like screaming at me, and I just saw, and I couldn't, I think I almost like, laughed out my nose.
But nobody had any idea. We just were like, why is it? She's a crazy person.
Good. I used that joke for a writing packet sample lately, so hopefully they think it's as funny as you do.
I know. If I knew it was going to get that big of a laugh, I would have like, we should have put that at the end. See, that's how it all
works. They like
works.
cheesy, corny, but really like clever right on.
Okay, well, see, now you're breaking down the joke too much. You should just be like, it's funny.
Yeah. It was.
Anyway, and thanks to everybody who's watching live in the chat. Storage Yard resident, always there. He never misses a show. I love the guy. So, a lot to talk about. There's obviously a lot of Kavanaugh to talk about. I guess the place
Kavanaugh caveat.
The Kavanaugh caveat. No caveat. Kavanaugh caviar. Just getting too far ahead of myself because I was like, oh, I think it'll sound funny, but not if you don't say it right. So there's obviously a lot of moving pieces right now, but currently we have the Senate Judiciary has hired a female outside counsel to question Kavanaugh's accuser, the first accuser, on Thursday. What's your takeaway from this story, Chelsea? I can see a lot of political angles here, but talk about sort of the legal ramifications of this hearing on Thursday.
Well, the legal ramifications of this whole thing are that there really are no legal ramifications.
Okay.
People are looking at this like it's a prosecution, like he's going to go to jail like Bill Cosby, but no such consequence will happen in this. And this, one of the things I'm seeing about this debate, it's like, how can something that happened so long ago, which at the time was, relatively acceptable, could ruin this man, that you can condemn him for it, that you would ruin his life? Excuse me, he's not going to jail. He's not even going to lose his current job. He would just be denied a promotion. To believe that he is entitled to it just because he was nominated sounds very entitled. And it's very funny that there's a lot of people that talk ish about millennials and the next generation of being so entitled. Well, actually, if you believe Brett Kavanaugh is entitled to this position just because you agree with his decisions and Trump nominated him, then you kind of had an entitled attitude too. So the short of it is that it will feel kind of like a trial, but it will not have any consequences of a trial. He will just be denied a promotion.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
You could have this hearing and find out, just some terrible behavior. And as long as everything would be under the statute of limitations, there's nothing will really happen. So you could hear some really terrible things. and it's like everybody will just vote the way they wanted to anyway, which is, it's probably still going to be the majority of the people would vote to confirm
This
him.
whole thing.
But there's just
the two.
you really only need a couple. So that's the interesting thing here. The point needs to be made, of course, that it's like, well, the accuser is going to get a chance to speak, and I believe Brett Kavanaugh is also going to get to speak. And I think that there are a lot of people who are fatigued by the idea that there are so many accusers coming now, and there's, I guess, 3 total, although I was reading conflicting things about the third one right before we went on the air. So there are at least multiple allegations, but really you just need one. And I wanted to ask Tamra sort of your thoughts on sort of the way that people are commenting on these hearings makes you want to stay away from, one, humanity, but certainly Twitter. You definitely want to stay off Twitter. And I think people are saying they've had enough with these last minute accusations, and President Trump called it a con game. I think that you have some surprising people who are being more sensitive than you might expect. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has a spokesperson role, so I think she's at least saying the right things, but she might be the only one from the White House saying the right things.
I had said last week that I was kind of surprised at the sensitivity that people were showing, even President Trump, because he was like, well, let's hear what she has to say, even though he was last week still defending Kavanaugh. But he was saying, let's hear what she has to say. In 1 week's time, I take all of that back. Like everybody sort of, all of the old white Republican men have sort of regressed and have just sort of gone to their own old place where only Orrin Hatch was at the time of last week, of just disparaging Dr. Ford and just saying, she was mistaken. How dare you say that she's to not even believe that this happened, but then to also add your own fun spin on it that she's mistaken. So that's just such a strange fictionalization of something that you're alleging didn't even take place. It's just such a weird detail to add on something. It's just it's incredible, the comments to there was an op-ed I read today in The Hill of people weaponizing the Me Too movement, and it's like, so far the Me Too movement has not been a weapon. There has not been any sort of false accusations that have come to light. It's only been a positive movement that we've had in this, and so to have this fear that seems to surround it, just I'm so confused by it. Where is this fear coming from of a false accusation when? Well,
I mean, and the point is, like, the way everyone seems, of a certain persuasion seems so quick to say, like, well, clearly it couldn't have happened. I don't think anybody knows Brett Kavanaugh that well. To even his wife can't say, like, oh, there's no way that he acted like this in high school. At the same time, you could find from hearing it, like, well, it's really hard to be 100% sure it's him, just so you talk to both of them. So I think you have a lot of people who've made up their mind about the hearing, regardless of it. You have people who were predisposed to not like him, so they're certainly the most vocal. But I think anybody who wants him to be on the Supreme Court is like, why does you have to vote on Friday or Monday? It's like there's plenty of time. Let's take a couple days. Let's listen to what she has to say, and then, like Chelsea pointed out, Brett Kavanaugh's not doing any time for anything. And if he doesn't do a better job explaining his story than he did in the interview he did with Fox News, where he basically said the same thing 8 times, then he's going to just sound guilty. And that's probably part of the problem, is or part of the fear. And it's not really a problem because that's sort of not being objective. It's just more the idea that once he starts talking about it, it's like, oh, yeah, no.
If you remember how he sounded with the Kamala Harris line of testimony, he sounded completely fabricated. So I think that people are afraid he'll sound like that again.
I think if I were a Republican senator, I would want this hearing to happen as soon as possible because I want Kavanaugh, his nomination out, and then let's get the next Republican nominee in there. If I were a Republican, that's what I would say. Let's move on to the next person. This guy's clearly done. Let's get him out of there. Let's move the process along. And, it's not a matter of we're waiting until a Democratic president gets a Democratic in there. It's that find a Republican who's not a sexual predator.
Right, and I think
is that asking too much?
I would say it's not asking too much, but I think you would have people who are saying that he isn't, and that's the reason why I think Dr. Ford is going to speak because. What the information we've gotten now is relayed through Dianne Feinstein for the most part. No, it's Feinstein, but it's funny to me. And I also never call her senator because of that time that she told that general you had to call her senator. But anyway, that's just me editorializing. So Di-Fi, she, and look, it's very easy for Republicans to be like, well, why did she sit on this? Well, because the woman didn't really want her story told.
And if Dianne Feinstein came out with it, they would say, well, it doesn't matter unless she comes out personally. So no matter what she did.
I mean, in hindsight, it's very easy to say like, well, if she's going to have to come out and speak about it anyway, she might as well have spoken about it then. But that wasn't the approach at the time. Scott, sort of and we're only talking about Dr. Ford at the moment. We'll get to some of the reactions to the other accusations in a moment. But as all of this back and forth happens, what are some of your thoughts? What seem to be the key points on this issue in particular?
Well, I think it's sort of a little bit what we talked about last week in the sense that at the time last week, Republicans were trying to be cautious because, and again, it's going to be politicized even though it shouldn't be when it's a serious situation like this, but they're politicizing because they're thinking the midterms are coming up in 5 weeks, and they know that they do not have suburban women, and a lot more of the moderate Republican women are very turned off right now, and they know that if they weren't being careful with giving this the full weight that it deserves, that any chance that they had on potentially holding on to the Senate could be hanging in the balance. But I think they've now gone back to what Tamra was saying, to their old tactic of just keep denying, and we're not going to give up because now if he pulls Kavanaugh, then it looks like there's a weakness or there was something wrong with, and that the accusation was true. So I think now they're hedging their bets to say, okay, let's go through the hearing, let's try to make it happen. But like we talked about last week, if they wait too much longer, they're going to have a hard enough time to vet another candidate and be able to get them through, before the midterms. And obviously, the new session of the court starts next week. So already, there's a chance that you're not going to have that ninth Supreme Court justice.
Don't care.
I know they don't care, but I'm just saying, like
400 some odd days.
I know, and that's the hypocrisy of it, is that they're trying to rush this through right now to start the next session, but yet, they were fine with letting it sit empty forever when Obama was president, and then at the time during the election at 2016, it said they'd leave it open indefinitely. So it is a little bit hypocritical, but I think the hearing is most important, and everyone should have a vested interest in making sure that it happens and done in the right way, and that way everyone can at least somewhat feel more comfortable with their vote, the senators voting after.
And one thing I noticed recently, for anybody like me who was too young to know about the Anita Hill accusations when Clarence Thomas was being nominated for the Supreme Court, she didn't come forward. It was part of his vetting process that they found her legal, the FBI found her case against Clarence Thomas. It wasn't a matter of her raising a flag when he was being nominated. So that I just bring that up to point out that this is how this administration is bad at vetting. They should have found this before. Well, actually, wait, did she?
No,
there was no formal accusation.
There was no formal
accusation. So it's a little bit different of a case then, but still.
But there seem to be people from that school willing to say now, like, yeah, I kind of remember hearing something about that. So if you vet somebody, it might be something that comes up. But obviously R. Scott Brown has kind of a perfect point here. If only there was an investigative body that could look into the allegations to clear Brett Kavanaugh's name.
No, Bart O. Kavanaugh, which is what Mark Judge wrote his probably
I know. This is why I made the comments, because I didn't want to dwell on that.
Well, because it's not in font 75, I thought that you really actually couldn't read it. Yeah.
That's fair.
I was just looking out for you.
Yeah, and he also says the Cosby sentencing couldn't have happened at a worse time for Kegmaster Kavanaugh.
And the other thing I would just add back to your thing, Tamara, about Anita Hill is, and I mentioned to someone yesterday, is it will be interesting to see how we've moved as a society since Me Too, but also where we are from the Anita Hill, period with Clarence Thomas in '91, to see, have we really changed as a society? Have we progressed? And we'll see what happens with that as well. Because
by the way, I think regardless of what happens with this hearing and this confirmation, we haven't actually progressed that much as a society.
Well, yeah, that's why.
So it's like this could be something that happened, but probably not.
With a staggering 3 women on the Senate Judiciary Committee. Imagine if we had half of the committee as women, depending on what the result will be.
Kamala Harris is going to be a fantastic prosecutor, in this.
And well, the Minnesota senator too. What's her name? Amy
Klobuchar.
Yeah, she's an attorney also. So hopefully between the two of them, we're gonna get a real courthouse drama.
The one questioning for the Republican senators is a female sex crimes prosecutor. So that's probably a smart move that they don't want to be very obvious that they're these 11 men badgering this potential victim.
Exactly.
They'd rather
actually
have
what I wanted to
woman.
bring up is because Dr. Ford's attorneys want to know who this person is, and they're saying that for this person's safety, they don't want to put it out there. I don't know. I mean, again, it's not a legal hearing, Chelsea, but it seems like it would be advantageous to at least have the name of the person that's going to be asking questions, so you can look for any possible bias, and that you might not find out till after the fact if they keep it a secret, right?
Knowing the approach that somebody tends to take, the way that they ask questions, so that you can be comfortable with it beforehand. You'd want to know that if you're going to answer somebody's questions. And because it's not a prosecution, why not know sort of in advance? I mean, surely Brett Kavanaugh has an idea of how he'll be questioned because he was already questioned by some of these same senators.
I would want to know, am I going to be questioned by Judge Judy or Judge Joe Brown? Because it's very different styles. And by the way, what if it's one of those? What if it's Judge Judy?
Yikes.
I've got some stories about Judge Joe Brown for another time.
We'll do a whole special on that.
Can we do some really quickly on the interview that he did last night with
Judge Joe
Fox
Brown?
News?
No, I don't think there's time for that.
one.
Oh, you're talking about Brett Kavanaugh with his wife.
Yeah.
His poor wife, by the way, who just was clearly he was prepped to say one thing, and she was not prepped for anything. I felt bad for her in that situation.
I didn't see this. I got to look up this interview.
Yeah. Let's see. Who was it with? It was
Marta. I don't know her name.
It was some blonde on Fox. Sorry, but that doesn't narrow it down. Juliet, see if you can find Brett Kavanaugh Fox News interview, and we could play a little of it. I think we can't play too much of these clips.
It aired last
on
night?
YouTube. Yeah, I heard it this morning, so that's why I'm not quite sure who the host was.
One of the things he said that stood out was he was talking about how late in life he lost his virginity.
Yeah.
I did hear that soundbite.
Which, look, I don't want to get too specific, but honestly, if there's ever an indication that you might be more likely to try something at a drunken high school party, it would be the fact that you have, in fact, not maybe enjoyed those kind of pursuits earlier in your life. So you might just be looking to take it. Yeah, so this is weird because it's like a Today Show airing of a Fox News interview. So you've got, and we could put AfterBuzz right on top of it, so we could have $3 bucks. Just turn it up a little bit, Juliet.
His wife
this is actually a NBC News piece about it. Period.
President Trump's Supreme Court pick in an unprecedented interview with Fox News, defending himself after 2 separate sexual misconduct accusations surfaced. One when he was at college at Yale, the other when he was a teenager in the 1980s.
This is the Dr.
I've never sexually assaulted anyone in high school or otherwise. I am not questioning and have not questioned that perhaps Dr. Ford at some point in her life was sexually assaulted by someone in some place. But what I know is I've never sexually assaulted anyone.
Kavanaugh deflecting when asked if he'd welcome an FBI investigation.
This is the last part we need.
Instead, calling for fairness and a chance to clear his name.
I know I'm telling the truth. I didn't do this or anything resembling this. This is wrong.
Right,
Ashley
and then,
Kavanaugh.
okay, you can turn it off, Julia. Thank you for finding that. He basically, that point that he just made is what he, through further questioning, well, do you think that people are motivated because of what you would say about Roe v. Wade, all these sort of things, and he just keeps saying the same thing. So she's the interviewer who I'm trying to do too many things at once, and I can't figure out who it is while I'm trying to look in the camera too. But she did a great job of really just not letting go. And let's put it this way: this wasn't an interview with Sean Hannity. This was somebody who was like really
wasn't a
trying.
softball.
This was somebody who was trying to get answers out of him, and he was not.
McCallum, is it something like that?
Martha McCallum is someone on Fox for sure. But so the little bit that you've seen, so this is the first time you've seen it, Tamra. And I think I heard you react while Judge Kavanaugh was speaking. Give us your reaction.
I have to say, I think that he does think that he didn't do these things because that's what rape culture is. You don't understand what is and is not correct behavior. I believe Dr. Ford, and I think that Kavanaugh wasn't aware that what he was doing at that time was wrong, because boys will be boys, just like what's his name, the Stanford swimmer, and
Brock Lesnar.
That's
Oh yeah,
I think
Brock
that's
Lesnar is a
a
UFC fighter. I had the Brock. I had the 50%. You know what? I could be on the Supreme Court too. And then, by the way, it was Martha McCallum. She did a great job in the interview. And then at the same time, I still feel bad for Brett Kavanaugh's wife in that interview. I don't have to feel bad for her in other parts of her life, but maybe I do, but maybe I don't. But in the interview, I felt like this was someone who was not well prepared.
So
she was really just
irritating.
there as a prop.
Yes.
And she would have loved to have not been asked any questions.
It's so irritating every time Trump, as he defends Kavanaugh, he also always has to say, and his lovely wife and beautiful daughter. And that's just so part of the problem, is that Trump can only describe a woman as lovely or beautiful, and, doesn't even fathom that is a branch of what this tree of misogyny and masculine culture is. It's all a part of, it's all falls under the same umbrella. And it's nails on a chalkboard every time I have to hear Trump describe any family member as lovely or beautiful.
Especially when he talks about Ivanka. I mean, let's be honest. That's the most uncomfortable. What were you going to say, Chelsea?
Well, when I brought this up originally, it was to point out how, when he was talking about how, I didn't lose my virginity until much after. It was very vague.
Right.
But
yeah,
here's the thing.
in the way that if he didn't have kids, I wouldn't be sure that he had actually had sex at this point. Yeah.
But here's the thing that I think some people don't know about sexual assault, is that it's not actually about sex.
Right. Exactly.
I'm
No,
glad
but I mean
you know
that's the exact point. Is that
it's about a power. It's about control. It's about getting whatever it is. But sexual assault is not just about sex. So it was interesting that was even a line of defense. Well, I didn't even lose my virginity till years later, but that has nothing to do with it. And I just wanted to point that out for people who had not yet made the disconnection between those two things.
And it kind of goes back to what you're saying, Tamara, about him not even recognizing the fact he might have done that, because now he's making this excuse about virginity and those things, and not even the thought that he could have still assaulted in a lot of other ways.
Well, it's just, he can have this thought that that's a good explanation, but there need to be people around him that explain, like, the fact that whether or not you lost your virginity actually isn't relevant to this conversation.
You might as
need
well
to stop
told us
talking.
about an ingrown toenail. It has nothing to do with it.
I don't believe that. That's fake news right there. He's never had an ingrown toenail.
But can I just make one other point that I think is a good sort of teachable moment outside of this situation? It was credit goes to Trevor Noah for bringing this even to my attention, that when Orrin Hatch was saying, I have met this guy, I know this guy, he is integrity, he's honest with me, that how somebody is towards you is not necessarily the same way they are towards everybody else.
Right.
It could be different to another man. It could be to somebody who's higher up, lower down on whatever societal totem pole that somebody measures themselves against. And somebody can be perfectly pleasant and nice and easily get along with you, and you think is honorable and noble, and be a complete
Monster.
Right.
monster.
Are you talking about Bill Cosby? Because you might as well be describing him, you know, because, America's TV dad, people loved him. And that was, and we saw him walking away in handcuffs. We don't have a lot of time for that, but I do want to move on to the second accuser. So I'm sure your point will be relevant to this as well. But I want to start with the second accuser by President Trump's tweets. We don't have to actually look at them. That's fine. President Trump said the second accuser, he said, was totally inebriated and all messed up. Oh, so good. So he was there. So he knows that the occasion where she says that Judge Kavanaugh exposed himself, that everybody was just so messed up. I didn't realize that Deborah Ramirez had invited Donald Trump. Look, he was there. Apparently, he knows he was drunk. But it still could have happened, by the way.
And listen, if anybody's an authority on exposing penises, it's President Trump.
Oh, you mean Toadstool? Yeah, I think that the interesting thing is really that he also, as you were saying last week, it was like, all right, he seems to be hitting the right tone. But then even, I don't remember what day that was last week. It wasn't Wednesday. I think Thursday, there were the tweets about Dr. Ford, which was, well, why didn't she report it back then? Why now? Why not? And
her loving
it's just,
parents.
And it's just like, you
report it immediately.
You've been in the business world your whole life. These issues have probably, I'm just going to assume, I'm going to say come up, not even directed at him. We could talk about that's a whole show. But like, as someone who runs a business, these kind of claims probably come up about other people, and you probably know how to talk about them and how not to talk about them. And if you don't know how to shut up about it, you realize, I'm going to let Sarah Sanders talk about it. But he can't stop himself, and that's the point. So the second accuser, I think, is when you started to see people get really upset. And by people, I mean conservatives on Twitter. I don't know about real people in the world. And, it's just they're very vocal. And I think that they're of a mindset that these are political maneuvers. And they are coming at a time that is politically expedient, of course, but they're not coming up because of that reason. But I guess that's why people see it. So they already didn't believe the first one. You can't believe the second one. And I don't know hardly anything about the third one. Because what Michael Avenatti said, he had a third one, and then we're not getting that information yet. So I don't quite know what that is. But we don't even need the second one. Just having one is enough. But it's like, you would think, like with Bill Cosby's a good example, go back to him. When there were a couple of allegations, you're like, yeah, okay, but then what did there end up being? Like 63, I think, is the number that I remember hearing. So at a certain point, there has to be a number where maybe not somebody who is a premium member to Sean Hannity's website, but somebody that's a little bit more of, say, a right-leaning moderate might be like, okay, I wasn't inclined to believe this, but boy, this is a lot. This is like Harvey Weinstein. You start to hear so many, you're like, all right, you can throw out like, 80% of them, and there's still too many. You throw out all of them except one, and there's too many. So I think it's interesting that it's not interesting, it's sad, but that you're finding people have to go, well, no, we have to listen to these stories. Like, of course, you don't want to believe it's true, and you can say that. You can be like, oh man, I like Brett Kavanaugh. I really don't want to believe this is true, but I'm going to have to hear it. What were you going to say, Tamra?
I would like to say to Orrin Hatch or to anybody, Orrin Hatch, I know you're watching right now.
Of course. So he always watches.
Lean into your computer right now.
He doesn't know what a computer is.
Imagine a time when you were in fourth grade and you were being bullied, and somebody gave you a wedgie on the playground or called you a name in math class or something like that.
I think you've read my diary.
I guarantee you remember the name of the person who did it. I guarantee you remember the circumstances surrounding it when it happened. So if I came to you and said, I think you're mistaken about that wedgie, Orrin Hatch, I think my point is, I'm trying to communicate to men who seem to think like these details could be fuzzy some way, putting it in some term for a guy of these are things that you remember. You don't forget details when bad things happen to you. So just a quick word to Orrin. That's all.
I mean, I was like, in his defense, I don't know if he could remember because that was so long ago.
You're talking about Orrin Hatch.
Yes, Orrin Hatch remembering what happened in 4th grade was,
Scott Moore always in defense of Orrin Hatch, always looking out for.
No, I don't defend him, but
we know that
I will never defend him. I'm just saying he's so old. That. He probably really doesn't remember.
Well, the world was still in black and white back then.
It definitely
he was tied to a railroad track.
But speaking of Scott Moore, your friend Mitch McConnell actually
my best friend.
personally warned President Trump that his tweets about Christine Ford are hurting Kavanaugh's chances. And how is Mitch McConnell the voice of reason in all of this? I mean, he's not the only one, but you know what I'm saying. He is a voice of reason, where it is from a side of the corridor that there are not a lot of reasonable voices.
No, I would say, I don't know if I call it reasonable, or his evilness is just so well done now that he knows that if Trump would shut up with the tweets, that maybe he could get his nominee through.
Yeah, his evilness is choreographed.
Yes, it's so well done now and so smooth after many years. Another old person that's had many years to get his evilness done correctly here. So I wouldn't quite say that he's reasonable in the more sense that he has an agenda and he wants to make sure that agenda happens. And if Trump's his tweets are gonna get in the way, then.
I do think the point is that if President Trump had sort of stayed with the approach, like, oh, we should definitely let her talk.
Yeah.
And then if every time it came up, he's like, well, we're going to let that play out. And if he didn't tweet about it, it wouldn't go away, but you wouldn't have this maybe they want the furor. I don't think I'm saying that word right, but the fury on the side of the right. Yeah, that's a F-U-R-O-R. I know the word, but I don't usually use it in conversation. I could define it on the SATs if you like.
Mein Führer.
I know. I was like, okay.
Maybe Dr. Herr Freud did indeed contribute to that. So there's that. I mean, that's the point. It's like, Trump is keeping this alive, but maybe in the way that Trump thinks, like, well, this is going to help Brett Kavanaugh because people are going to be so mad, but it's not going to change the way that most people vote. But as we said, you really need 2 senators to decide not to vote for him. And Lisa Murkowski is always one that, Republicans and Democrats have kept a special eye on. She very specifically said, take the Kavanaugh accusation seriously, which she should have issued that statement, and then everybody, all the senators and the president could have just all signed on to her statement and been like, yeah, what she said. Well, let's just listen. But everybody has to weigh in, and I don't know, Chelsea, do you think? I know you don't want to put your mind inside of theirs, but do you think they think if they just have this blanket, it can't possibly be true, and you just stick with it no matter what? They just figure, okay, well, the guy's just going to get confirmed.
Well, it works for Fox News. Just keep saying the same thing over and over again, regardless of the truth of it, and enough people will believe it.
That sounds like something out of Clinton Cash. Go on.
Yeah, so that's a short answer.
Right, exactly.
It has worked, so they're not that stupid to believe that it will work this time. But I do imagine that there's some mad scientist that works for a pharmaceutical company that's like, maybe I can invent a pill for restless thumbs instead of restless leg syndrome. It's like restless thumb syndrome, and I can see that the Republicans are trying to make Merck or somebody come out with this quickly so it can be dropped into Trump's drink so that his thumbs will perhaps not be as usable for him and things might go a little smoother for them, because I do think it makes a difference. And I think it makes a difference in other ways, larger ways, like when he says, if this allegation was really true and it was really as bad as she's saying it was, this is referring to Ford, that she would have reported this much earlier. And then, hundreds of thousands of women shared their story of why I didn't report. And so this actually, I think, very, very slowly and probably to a small degree, helps move the conversation forward in terms of enlightening men about why people don't report. And again, another disconnection. Just because something bad doesn't happen, Wait, hold on a minute. I think I almost disconnected myself. Just because something bad happens doesn't mean it gets reported. And just because something wasn't reported doesn't mean it didn't happen. So,
I mean, people like, look, if I get a speeding ticket, I'm going to try, like when I was a kid, if I got a speeding ticket, and I did, I tried to make sure that my parents didn't know I got it, you know, and that's a speeding ticket. You know, sure, that could hurt somebody who's driving too fast. That's not the point. That's not like this level of a crime. It's just sort of like, yeah, I'm not going to talk about it. And so the idea that she didn't want to talk about it is just, hasn't he ever watched... This show's been on 20 years. He hasn't seen one episode of Law & Order SVU. I mean, not even once. I feel like he was on it at some point. But anyway, we have to move on to something. But Scott, I want to give Scott and Tamra a couple minutes to...
I would just say really quick to that, too, is like it also can take a while for the person who had that incident happen be able to come to terms with it and deal with it. And so it can take them a long time to even share it just because of that, because they're... have to, you know, kind of work through it themselves and process it and realize, oh, this wasn't right. And you know, so that can take a long time and sometimes, and it's traumatic and you bury it down and it comes back to the surface years later because other incidents or something else brings it to light. So, yeah, it kind of goes back to your point that just because it wasn't reported, there's a whole list of reasons why it may not have happened.
Perfectly valid reasons why it wasn't reported.
Why it didn't happen and reported immediately at that time and that moment in time. And that's something that people do really have to understand.
Tamara, I want to get your thoughts, but specifically react to, I was talking about Lisa Murkowski. I have the quote was, "We are now in a place where it's not about whether or not Judge Kavanaugh is qualified. It is about whether or not a woman who has been a victim at some point in her life is to be believed." It would seem that there are, I don't want to use the word plurality, mostly because it's a big word and I've shown I can't use those, right? But it seems like there are very vocal people on the right who are like, no, we're going to get back to the part about whether or not the judge is qualified. Give us your thoughts on sort of all that.
I think we need more Republican women in Congress. I think the Republican side of Congress needs to diversify.
Look, they've got Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski. I don't understand why you think that there should be more.
They've got a white man with no chin, a white man with partial chin, and an old white man with a semi-partial chin.
Let's get some old ladies. Let's get some old ladies with chin hair. Come on.
You know, of this massive rush of women running for political office, I think a very small minority of them have been Republican women. That's all on the Democratic side.
All right. Obviously,
we have so little diversity in Congress as a whole, both sides, as it is, I think, but very much less so on the Republican side.
And you don't really hear about the Joni Ernst in Iowa or the Shelley Caputo Moores in West Virginia. You know, some of the ones that you would hope would maybe come out to the forefront a little bit more choose not to. And I can't think of her name in Nebraska too. So there are more women senators, like 6 on the Republican side, but you only hear about the 2 that are the only moderates left.
Well, the ones that you might convince.
Yes, the other ones seem to be firmly entrenched on the right.
Because we only have a few minutes, I definitely want to move along. But obviously, I am certain we will continue talking about this next week and beyond. But President Trump spoke to the United Nations, and that always goes well when he does it. Juliet, I believe, has a moment that was heard around the world, and I enjoyed it. So let's listen to it, and then we'll react to it.
In less than 2 years, my administration has accomplished more than almost any administration in the history of our country. America's so true. Didn't expect that reaction, but that's okay.
And I tell you, there's a lot of times to not like Donald Trump when he laughs at the. Didn't expect that reaction, but okay. I laughed even harder at that moment, and it's funny because at first you hear just there's a little. It's a little rumble of laughter, but then people are like, "Oh, okay, we are going to laugh at this."
A lot of them are reading because there's translation. They have a ticker in front of them with the translation, so there is a time delay of
that's a great point.
Of them.
That is a good point.
Getting translated.
Yeah, and then he's like, you know, and of course he always has his lines like, "So true," and then they finally catch up, and it's funny because he has that moment where he throws in his like, "So true," you know, where he tries to emphasize something. That's where everybody hears the laughter. I think that I don't know. I guess the UN, probably not just go out on a limb, Scott. Do you think the UN takes Donald Trump seriously?
I'd say no, and I would also we can update the old adage now. I guess it is true. The whole world can laugh at you.
Yes, that's true.
So, especially if you're Donald Trump, the whole world really can laugh at you.
Yeah.
Who knew?
So, Scott, do you think it's accurate that his administration has done more than, he didn't say any, but he said almost any. He's done more than most administrations, right? I mean, and he's saying like 8 terms, 8-year terms, or even Franklin Roosevelt, who was there for 13 years before he died. He did more than him. Right? I mean, he's done more than everybody.
I was going to say he did more than William Henry Harrison. I'll give him credit there. And James Garfield.
Those are good points.
I think that's about it.
It's almost, well, I was going to say it's almost a push with JFK, but, I mean, the space program.
I was just saying William Henry Harrison and James Garfield were president total for about 7 months. So
yeah,
I'll give Trump credit there. He's been president a little bit longer now, but barely.
I personally, I can't even be embarrassed for the president because he just doesn't have that in him.
No.
But what I think matters about when other leaders laugh is that this isn't people just like you and me who are laughing at him, who have no idea what his job is like. These are other people in similar jobs who understand what the job is like. So it's kind of like, it's not the critic who counts, who's never in the arena,
it's your
to
peers,
kind of to narrow down the Roosevelt quote. These people are in the arena. They're in the very same arena that he is. So these are his peers who have a really solid idea of what that job is like.
And also some of them who've been around for a while, too, that know what previous administrations met and worked with previous presidents and know, America to some degree from those experiences in the past.
So I think that those laughs should, if they could, sting harder, but I don't think he has embarrassment. It would sting more because they're coming from people who are, I would say, on his level, but that's bringing other people down. But you know what I'm trying to say.
I think if there was a sting to be felt, it would not be coming from his peers. It would be coming from the media, because that's who he seems to take any sort of criticism. That's what needles him. But I have to say, to the media's credit, in everything that I watched today, nobody took the opportunity to find this as delicious as I did. You could really revel in the embarrassment. Maybe he's not feeling it, but to feel it for him just felt really good. But the consensus that I heard on CNN and NPR and different pundits talking was that this was just a matter of he's only used to giving speeches to his base. He specifically talks to his base and rallies to his base.
I mean, he's used that line before. We've heard that line before.
We've heard that line a million times, and he's only ever used to hearing cheers because he's only ever giving that to his supporters, because he refuses to put himself in front of anybody else that is not, 100% patting him on the back. So that was a genuine shock to him to hear that response.
He's usually good at knowing his audience, because his audience are the same 3 kind of people, almost just magnified in numbers, but he doesn't know how to know your audience outside of those 3 people,
outside of his rallies, outside of his campaigning, that he still is constantly campaigning for a race that he's already won, and 2 people who are already on board with him. That's all he knows how to talk to.
But did he say that to distract us from something else that is more consequential than he said? Because I wonder if he knows by now this is what everybody's going to be talking about. I mean, did he say anything of substance besides?
He
talked
about North Korea. He said how
Iran.
He talked about Iran reaching out to him for a meeting, which the Iranian leader has contradicted and said, we've never asked him for. We have not reached out.
But he did call him a lovely man, though. In his tweet, he actually referred to him as lovely. So I guess he also calls him lovely.
I had somebody
his
use of lovely, which
on
is so weird.
point out, oh my gosh, how dare Trump call this man lovely?
Yeah.
And all the rest of the many people in his comments said Trump was being sarcastic, which apparently is the response that Fox News gave.
And then capable of being sarcastic.
Everybody just parroted that. He was just being sarcastic. He was just being sarcastic.
Can you imagine if Hillary Clinton said that it was president? There would be another, hearing for that if she had tweeted that.
Well, we will leave it on that laugh line. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us in the chat. We'll be back next Tuesday at 4 Pacific. Until then, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram. And tomorrow night, it is the 22nd season premiere of South Park, so I'll be right here at 10 p.m. Pacific talking about that. #cancel South Park, #cancel South Park after show. Chelsea, where do people find you?
At Chelsea Galicia.
And Tamra.
You know what? Check out my dance troupe on Liquid Feet on YouTube. That's something totally different.
Okay.
I love the different.
I did
look
too.
at that.
Like, I didn't even
Mixing
know.
up the plugs. And Scott
Even I
Moore.
learned something now. You can find me on Twitter at sman80. I'm sure I'll probably be
You know what? Just for us,
fighting with Mitch McConnell.
Fight with Orrin Hatch between today and next Tuesday.
Yes, I will definitely comment.
That is a request.
I will
Please do
definitely
that.
comment.
All right, and you can follow the show at Trump Report ABTV. We will see you next time. Thanks so much, everyone.
Our founder, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and me, Maria Menounos, would like to thank you for tuning in to AfterBuzz TV. Remember, we're not just the first, we're the biggest in the world, and we're the only destination for all your favorite TV shows. Whatever you crave, we've got it. So go to AfterBuzzTV.com and check out our lineup. Buzz you later.
The views expressed herein are those of the hosts only and do not necessarily reflect the views of AfterBuzz TV or its owners or principals.